I actually recognize everyone in this room right now. It's actually kind of awesome. Whenever you do a panel like...
You all day.
I'm sorry?
We've been stalking you all day.
That's true, that's true. And most of you have been purchasing things, so thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. No, I mean, it's great. Like, so I'll just open up with kind of, you all know who I am. I'm Trevor Mueller. I'm a comic book guest here at the show. And the reason that this panel even exists is because my first year at an anime convention was Anime Central. Guests had to submit 3+ panels into the thing. And at the time, I only had one book on the table, which was a book called Asshole. And so I submitted that as one of my panel submissions. I was like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to do a panel about Asshole. I'll do like a marketing 101, and then I'll do something about webcomics. And I'd submitted, I think, like 5 total panel recommendations. So when I got into the con, they gave me my agenda, and there was the Marketing 101, there was a webcomics panel, and then there was Trevor in the panel that shall not be named. And when I went into the brochure and I looked at the description was blank. There was nothing in there, it was empty paragraphs. I was like, okay, maybe this isn't a Harry Potter riff, I'm not quite sure what's going on. And so I go through the entire convention just like asking people, like guest relations, anyone, I'm like, hey, do you guys know what I'm supposed to be talking about here for an hour? Because I have no idea. And they're like, no idea, but you could talk to this person. And it became like this weird like adventure video game where it's like, find this person, and then if you trade these 2 things, you can go back to this person and find out what they need to know to find out the next person that you're doing. Like I was just running all over the board. And eventually I got in touch with the woman who wrote it. And I was like, hey, I've got this panel that starts in 15 minutes, called the panel that shall not be named, and there's no description. What am I supposed to talk about for an hour? And she was like, I don't know. They told me you just needed a 3rd panel. I later come to find out that it was supposed to be an asshole panel, but they couldn't put that into the brochure. But so I start this panel off, I'm 5 minutes before, and I have no idea what the hell I'm going to talk about, and I end up opening up with the panel the way that I'll open up this panel here, which is, hey, I'll bet you're all wondering what this panel is going to be about. I'm not going to lie to you, until about 5 minutes ago, I was asking myself the exact same question. So what it ended up turning into was, and what this panel will be, is me just telling goofy stories for an hour. Because that's what I like to do. All the books that I have up on my table, all the comic books and stuff that I write, are all comedy pieces. I like to tell funny, embarrassing stories, typically about myself, but some of them will be about other people. Particularly about Doug Walker, who's sitting over there. And that's the reason he's even in this room right now. And then all the rest of the Channel Awesome people are like, we want to hear the story about Doug too. Doug doesn't even know this story. It'll come. It'll come. But first we're going to embarrass me, because you can't embarrass other people before you embarrass yourself. So, I'm a very nerdy person. Being social is not something that comes naturally to me. I know, right? I write comic books. When I was going and doing online dating, people were like, what do you like to do? I'm like, write comic books. They're like, no, seriously. Like X-Men? No, I can't write Marvel. They won't hire me. Yet. Maybe one day. So I was, when I got out of college, when I moved back to Ann Arbor, there was a club over there that I used to go to, and I don't really like dancing, I don't really like the club scene at all, but for some reason I kind of meshed with this place, and it's called Necto. And Necto is a theme club. Every night of the week is kind of a different theme and a different type of music. Thursday nights was college night, I avoided the crap out of that. Friday nights was Pride night, so if I wanted men to buy me drinks, I would go then. And they played a lot of 80s music, which was kind of fantastic because I grew up in the 80s. I was all like, Gloria Estefan, yeah! And then I was reminded that I was a white man trying to dance, and it just didn't work. And then I ended up, so Saturday night was Frequency night. And the only night that I ended up going to was Monday nights, and Monday night was Factory night. And Factory night is like goth music. It's techno-industrial, kind of like 9 Inch Nails put to a beat that you can actually dance to. And it's a very interesting crowd of people that they had there. One of the regular attendees that we had was this guy named Jimmy, and Jimmy would put in these prosthetic vampire fangs. He had this long, straight blonde hair. He wore the exact same Lost Boys t-shirt every time that he came in. And instead of saying hello to you like a normal person would, you would go, hey Jimmy, and he would howl like he was a werewolf at the moon. He'd be like, ow! And you're like, oh shit. And Jimmy was a hugger, which is fine, I'm a hugger too. The reason that I went to this place was twofold. One, a good friend of mine from high school went there, and her now wife she had met there as well. Just really, really cool people. And goth people dance very differently than they do at the clubs. At the clubs, they're kind of like grinding up against each other. Goth people take up like an entire section, and they just do what's called like the goth stomp. But it's kind of like square dancing a little bit, but there's more like arm movement involved. I can't do it right now. But it's ridiculous, and really, really fun, and extremely exhausting. So you need some good drinks. And Necto had fantastic adult beverages. Is anyone here under the age of 21? Keep your hands down. So nobody's under the age of 21. Fantastic, we can tell drinking stories. So Necto would have drink specials all the time. The thing that I particularly liked was $2 Long Island iced teas until 11. And then I would sober up in between 11 and midnight, and then I would go home and go to work the next day. And so Necto would also do all the, so before we go into that, so the apparel at Necto, right, not unlike what you kind of see at a rave, but significantly less conservative. You would have women that would show up to these things in like thongs and electrical tape over their nipples. And my favorite two people that would show up, and I never actually talked to these people, were the latex people, and they showed up in full body latex with like the zipper over the mouth and everything. And I was like, how do you go to the bathroom when you have to go? That has to be really hot in there. Like, how do you get that on and off? I got very, very interested, not enough to ask, because I also didn't want them to sit there and throw me in a well and be like, it puts the lotion on its skin or it puts it on its skin. So one night, I ended up meeting a girl there, a girl I ended up dating for about 2 years, Laura. She's the inspiration for the Asshole Laura's 21st birthday story. And the first night that we invited my brother to this club, and possibly one of the reasons why Laura ended up breaking up with me years later, was because they had a bra and panties competition, where women would go up onto the stage in their bra and their panties, and they would dance. And everyone, based on kind of cheering and stuff, would decide who moves on. However, Necto had a rule that you couldn't actually show nipple, and my friend Libby wanted to enter into this thing, but she had a see-through bra. So she comes up to me and she's like, so I can't actually enter into this bra and panties competition because nobody's got any electrical tape, I can't do anything like that. And I was like, well, I'll enter into the competition for you. Swap me out what you're wearing. So she gives me whatever this Victoria's Secret number is that she's got, and I go up to the DJ, and I'm just kind of like, Jinx, maybe? And Yoda, this MC who's kind of running the thing, looks at me and he's like, look, dude, if it were up to me, you'd be up on that stage, shaking that pale thing you call an ass, you know, with those 13 other women, and it'd be all right. But it's not up to me, so you can't do it. I was like, oh man, that's too bad. Just put on these brand new boxer shorts that have pinup girl playing cards on them. He's like, get your white ass up on the stage. And so I'm up on this stage with 13 other women for what feels like 2 hours as they're just like playing songs. And I'm eventually like losing my buzz and not feeling like I'm having a good time until they finally start announcing this thing. And I'm like third from the stage right, 13 people, so I'm like over here, there's like a pole here, there's like a pole over there. And they start announcing that, hey, all right, we're gonna start doing this contest here with this bra and panties competition, and the first person that's up there is Candy. And she's got like some kind of stripper name. And Candy goes over to the pole and starts doing some sexy dance, and I suddenly become very aware of the fact that I am a dude in a bra on a stage. And Candy finishes up her routine that she's doing over there, just some kind of sexy girly dance that I could never repeat because I don't have hips. And then they go up to the next person like, and the next person up is Sasha. And again, I become very reminded of the fact that I'm a dude on a stage in a bra. And Sasha starts doing pole dancing work, where she's like hanging upside down by her leg. And I'm like, I don't have hips, I don't have pole abilities, and I don't have the two things that people up here are really kind of looking to see during this competition. What the hell am I gonna do? And I'm next. They're about to call me. And they're like, all right, and the next up is the only person on the stage with a penis, Trevor. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna drop my pants. And I just drop them and go. I got third place. So Libby got a free drink out of it. And I stretched out her bra so she couldn't wear it anymore. So the club was really kind of a place where I ended up gravitating towards quite a bit during what I call my Laura years. And again, Laura broke up with me for reasons that absolutely make no sense because there weren't really any given. And I wrote a series of comics just kind of dealing with it and whatnot. And eventually I ended up leaving Michigan entirely and moving over to Chicago. And Chicago was a fantastic place for me to gravitate towards because there are a lot of conventions here, there's a lot of anime shows and stuff like that, and it really kind of jump-started my career in comics. And going to the comic book shows, or to the anime shows, you end up meeting a lot of guests and a lot of celebrities, and running into embarrassing, kind of bizarre situations with them. Anyone here heard of Johnny Young Bosch, one of the guests that's here at the show? Yeah? If you're not raising your hand, are you at Anime Midwest? No? So, Johnny and I at an Anime Central, he and I, probably 2 years ago, went through a period of time where we were doing like 6 or 7 shows together in a year. So I got very close with him and Maurice and Polo and their bassist at the time, Crystal. And at Anime Central that particular year, it was like a Saturday night. I was feeling really good about myself, and I decided I was going to go hang out with the band. And they all started playing drinking games, because everyone in this room is over the age of 21, right? Yep, okay, good. So we started playing this game called King's Cup, which I had never heard of before. I didn't play drinking games in college, but essentially it's a game where you put like this empty cup in the middle of a deck of cards that you just kind of put around it, and every card that you draw out is a different drinking game. It's I Never, or it's what's called Waterfall, where the person to your left, you have to drink as long as the person to your left is drinking, and I was always to Crystal's left, so I'd be sitting there going like this, and she'd be giving me the dirtiest look, because she's like, I don't want to drink this beer anymore. And then we would play games like I Never, and you learn about a person more so, I think, during a drinking game than you do during any other kind of interaction that you have with them. I would come up with some of the most bizarre shit to say. Like, I've never been to an Australian country and been labeled a frog and had some Australian chick kiss me on the cheek. And Johnny Young Bosch is like, you son of a bitch. And then I sit there and just make up just bizarre crap. Like, I've never been to another country and blah, 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 blah. Random crap would happen. And everyone would just kind of look at Johnny and he'd be like, don't tell my mother. It just kind of keeps going. So it's great that actually Johnny and the rest of the band are here. I was hanging out with them earlier tonight, and I just kind of told you guys that story where Polo comes up to me and he's like, you're married. I got married last year, by the way. Thank you, and we'll actually talk about that process in a moment, because marriage was really kind of interesting. But so additional people that you end up meeting at these conventions and stuff, one of which is Doug Walker. That's right, I'm going to talk about you right now, buddy. Uh-oh. He's like, oh no, don't do it. The first time I met Doug doesn't know this story, by the way. So Doug's never heard this. And Doug's,
I was there.
And you were there, which is bizarre. And this is all captured on YouTube too. You can actually see this if you look this up. Anime Milwaukee, I can't remember the year. It's probably been like 3 years. Opening ceremony. This was the first time I met him and Uncle Yo, and I was there with Alan Evans. It was the second year I'd ever done Anime Milwaukee. The first year they went to the convention space. And Doug and Uncle Yo were kind of playing weird games behind the stage and whatnot, and they decided to call all the guests up to the stage for this opening dais and basically just give us the mic and said, entertain everyone for 30 minutes. And Doug and Carl kind of seemed to take over the thing. It became the Doug and Carl show. And the two of them were just kind of doing their thing, and Spike would try to interject when he could, or I would try to, get a plug in every now and then, and Uncle Yo, Carl, became aware of the fact that they were kind of capitalizing on the event, and looks over and he's just like, well, let's talk to other people for a minute. Let's see what they have to say and what they do. What do you guys do down at the end there? And I was like, oh, hi, I'm Trevor Mueller. I'm one of the comic book guests of the show. And Doug goes, comic books, those are for nerds. We should boo them. Boo! And you can watch this on YouTube because my face drops and I go, because you never get an audience to boo another guest. Years later, I have since learned that this was a character persona that Doug was wearing, but at the time I was very angry. And suddenly I became uncharacteristic to myself, very quiet during the rest of these opening ceremonies. And the smile that's normally on my face was very absent. And mostly I was just kind of sitting there just seething. And I didn't have to interact with Doug very much during the rest of that weekend. I think he came and interviewed me at one point about my comics, and I was just pitching those. It was very just kind of casual conversation. And Scorpios tend to keep things internal for a very long time, and I was very angry. So much so that the next time I saw Doug, which was at C2E2 later that year, he came up and exchanged pleasantries with me, and I wanted nothing to do with the man. I was like, Doug, you bastard. Trying to get people to boo me. How dare you?
Really turned to Batman.
I'm going to plan my revenge. Because I later found out, I had no idea who the hell Doug Walker was. I didn't watch Nostalgia Critic stuff at that point. I think somebody had introduced me to him up to that point. But I was like, I'm going to get my revenge. And I found out that he and I were both going to end our year at Collision Con. And I was like 8 to 10 months to plan what I was going to do to Doug. And I plotted, and I planned, and I was coming up with ways that I was going to publicly humiliate him at the next opening ceremonies, or ways that I was going to do some grandiose scheme and drop his pants on stage, or something ridiculous. And we ended up getting to Collision Con that year. It was at the end of the year. And I go to check in, I'm like, hey, are there any other guests that are here? And they're like, oh yeah, Doug Walker's downstairs eating some ice cream. And I was like, Doug, finally, your comeuppance has arrived. I'm about to get my fulfillment. 8 to 10 months worth of planning will culminate in this beautiful thing that I'm about to do. I don't know what it is, but it'll be grandiose, and it won't be pleasant for you. And we end up going downstairs, and I see Doug with his back to us, kind of eating ice cream, and I'm like, yes, this is my time. This is my moment, Doug. And Doug sits there and he like takes his scoop and like comes up and kind of like notices me and recognizes me for a second. He's like, oh hey, your name's Trevor, right? Oh yeah, that's great, great. You've got a panel tonight, don't you? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, oh, well, I'm going to be there for it. I would love to see you talk. Okay. Because suddenly my plans for revenge have gone out the window. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't the Doug Walker that I remember. This isn't the Doug Walker who insulted me in front of an entire audience of people. This is a dude who was generally being pleasant and ultimately was being very friendly. And so I was like, okay. So Doug and I ended up building up this rapport throughout the entire weekend, hanging out, having dinner, having drinks together. And I came to discover what I now know again, that he was kind of putting on this persona during this opening ceremonies. However, when I ended up meeting his now wife, and they ended up meeting my now wife during breakfast on a Sunday morning, I did finally get a moment to rant a little bit about Doug Walker, where his wife had ended up saying something to the effect of, you know, when he films his Nostalgia Critic videos down, you know, at the house, all I hear is this yelling and screaming and just weird stuff, and I'm pretty sure something's broken, and I have no idea what the hell's going on. And I was like, let me tell you about Doug Walker. And I went on this diatribe about excessive yelling and eccentricism, and basically got all of this 10 months out in like a 5-minute period of just like, Doug's not funny, Doug's just being crazy like Dane frickin' Cook, and he just sits there and screams and yells, and he thinks that going, whoa, is funny, because if I can make louder noises, then it means comedy, and yes! And this is of course not all true. Doug is actually a fantastic human being and has since become a good friend. In fact, I think we did maybe 1 or 2 more conventions together after Collision Con, after I got all of that out of my system. And he shoots me an email one day on Facebook and says, hey, we've kind of grown really close together. Would you like to come to my wedding? And I was very touched by this. I was like, aw, we've hung out like 4 times. And I hated you for like 10 months. I would love to come to your wedding. And then of course when I went to the wedding, I had allergies, so I was suffering like the entire time. And it was hard to do because you're like, you want to be happy for the man, but at the same time you're in the back and your whole face is just like dripping, and you're like, oh, I'm so happy for Doug. I'm not crying, I swear, it's allergies. But it was a fun time, and I got to see the man dance, and that man can dance. And then when he ended up coming to my wedding, the dude just ended up dancing all night, which was absolutely great.
Tables accidentally. You and Beth, yeah.
What's that?
Well, yeah, I accidentally pushed you at separate ends of the room. You and Beth.
That's true. At their wedding, they ended up putting my now wife at the opposite end of the room from me.
Don't make me get a back credit card and call the police.
You bastard. I knew it was on purpose.
Buy your revenge for 8 more months. I'm gonna get married again, like you do.
Married again, or it's like a baby shower or something like that. I'll sit there and be like, little Doug. You don't know the original sin you have inherited. But I shall get my revenge.
Barely Doug's in the bigamy, who knew?
So this is a story that Doug had never heard before, and hopefully now, you recognize that we are still obviously good friends and hang out all the time. And now Doug's like, great, I'm gonna make him embarrassed in one of my videos. Well, Doug's put me in 2 of his videos before. For those of you who don't recognize me, I was Aang, the Last Airbender in the Last Airbender review, and then I was also Terry Zahn in the Dragonboard movie, which that movie was very popular. For our laughs, because he was in that movie too. We got an IMDb credit for it, buddy. That's what matters. And so it was funny, because I think the first one that I ended up doing was Dragonboard. And he was like, yeah, we just kind of need like this business person to come in. Do you have a suit? And I, of course, had a suit that I was swimming in, because I'm skinny. And it came in, he was like, all right, all you got to do is just kind of read these lines and just kind of be eccentric and crazy. And one of the scenes was kind of very scripted, and one of the scenes I had a little bit more flexibility in improv. And we had actually done at that Collision Con an 18+ improv panel, where I had explained to you that I thought that vulgarity was extremely funny. And so when we ended up doing the improv for the Dragonboard scene, which is in the deleted scenes, if you guys don't own a DVD, go buy it, I want 10%. And he put this into the preview too. I basically went on this diatribe of just dropping F-bombs, to which when I finally watched the movie, I realized I was the only person dropping F-bombs in this movie. And I write children's comics. So Doug sits there and he kind of gives me like a couple of talking points. Doug and Rob and their dad, Barry, were in the room. Or Barney, sorry. And they were all in the room kind of giving me like talking points and stuff. And there was a script to follow, and I think we followed a couple of those pieces. And then they're like, do you guys want to do like some improv? Do you just want to like go at it? You're the CEO of this gaming company. This world is very open, and there's a lot of things that you can do in it. We really want to stress the fact that users have this experience that they can do whatever they want. And I'm like, yeah, I can embellish that. Can I swear? And they're like, sure. I'm like, because vulgarity is funny. And so I started going off on this very crazy tangent, where I was just like, oh yeah, you can do all this stuff in this game. You can get married, you can have kids. You can't kill your kids yet, but we'll release a patch for that. You can go to the town over and marry someone over there and have their kids, and your wife doesn't know about it, and then your wife finds out about it later and burns the town down. You can sit there and ride frickin' dragons and go all around. Oh no, don't kill us, Mr. CEO. Fuck you, demon people. I'm just like making up all this crap as we're going. The 3 of them are just behind the camera just cracking up, just like which was very, very hard for me because I'm not an actor and I can't keep a straight face, which is why I smile throughout that whole thing. I think I have the acting chops of Tobey Maguire. Do you agree?
You don't cry as much as he does, but yeah.
Okay. I have what I call the Tobey Maguire mouth, where the mouth kind of curls up, and I'm smiling. I don't know it. I can't help it. It's just happening. And that's very difficult to do when you're trying to do drama. Thank God I haven't been trying to do drama. The other thing that he ended up having me do was the Last Airbender stuff, where I came in, I think I had 3 lines for this thing in total, and I was in front of a green screen, not actually interacting with anyone other than Doug on the other side of the camera, and I kept forgetting my lines. And my lines were something along the lines of, what's up, whatever, never mind. But I needed to put like an in there, or there'd be like little nuances that Doug would have. So he'd be like, all right, you're Aang, the Last Airbender, and you're gonna appear in front of this green screen, and I just need you to just kind of like jump into place there. And I'm like, all right. He's like, yeah, like that, but more dramatic, more heroic. My chest doesn't puff out any more than this. You know? And then we would sit there and be like, all right, recite this line, like the whatever, and I'm like, whatever. He's like, nah, too much emotion. This is an M. Night Shyamalan movie. You have no acting ability whatsoever. Which part of that sentence isn't true? and I'm just like going back, and he's like, I'm like, whatever. And he's like, no, but you forgot this part. And like I kept forgetting like little things throughout the whole thing. I think all 3 lines ended up taking something like 2 hours to film. Yeah. Doug's like, this is the reason why this is the last project that you've been involved with for the NC. What a waste of film stock. So you end up meeting, again, a lot of celebrities and stuff throughout the course of these conventions. I'm going to tell a story now that some of you might have heard if you've ever been to this panel before. Does anyone here know who Mark Silvestri is? Anyone here not know who Mark Silvestri is? Everyone? All right. So Mark Silvestri is a pretty famous comic book creator. He did a lot of work for Marvel in the 90s, working on Wolverine and stuff, and then was one of the people who left to found Image Comics, and he founded Top Cow, their Top Cow branch. And so Mark Silvestri is kind of like this rock star among geekdom, where he wears like skin-tight pants, he's got well-coiffed hair, he wears his sunglasses indoors, married to a supermodel. Like, the dude is just a very attractive man in a sea of geeks, and kind of sticks out if you know what he looks like. So we were at the last Wizard World Chicago, which was here in Rosemont, before the publishers stopped coming. And Mark and I had kind of exchanged a couple of clinks and stuff in the bar. I'd met Brian Michael Bendis and had my first fanboy moment where I was waving at Taki Soma, and Brian Bendis starts waving back at me, and I'm like, oh shit, I need to go talk to this man. He's one of the biggest writers in Marvel right now, and now he has become the biggest writer at Marvel Comics. And I go over and I'm just like, hey, Brian, what's going on? He's like, nothing, you know, I saw you waving and stuff. He's like, yeah, well, I was actually waving at Taki, who's now married to Mike's best friend, or Brian's best friend, Michael A. Von Oming. And Brian was like, oh, I figured because I was bald and you were bald that we were bonding. And I was like, we were bonding. I gotta go. Suffice it to say, I ended up drowning my sorrows in adult beverage that night. And so did a bunch of my friends, my buddy Josh, my buddy Steve, and this girl named Rose. And we were in the bar until probably about 3:30 in the morning, until Rose gets this brilliant idea in her head that we should go across the street to what's now the Hilton to go use their 24-hour pool. I'm sober enough to realize that this is a bad idea, but drunk enough to not say anything about it. And so the 4 of us begin this pilgrimage through the hamster tunnels to try to get to this pool that we believe is open. And it's at 3:30 in the morning, we are trashed. Rose is in fact so drunk that she can't even stay moving for more than a couple of feet. She'll sit there and walk and then just kind of like sit down and lay up against the wall. And being the most sober one in the group, I'm sitting there realizing that we're suddenly a person short. She's back a couple feet, I gotta go back, pick her up, and keep her moving forward. And as I'm doing this, I do this like 3 or 4 times. As I do this, I realize that we're being followed by 2 people. One of which has well-coiffed hair, wears skin-tight jeans, and wears his sunglasses indoors, and is a very attractive man. And then the person next to him is clearly not Mark Silvestri's wife. It's Mark Silvestri that's following us, if you haven't caught on to that yet. And so Mark at one point sits there and announces himself and goes, hey, do you guys know the way to con parking? Because we are totally lost. And my buddy Steve looks at me and in a voice about as quiet as I'm about to utter right now says, dude, it's Mark Silvestri. I want to go talk to him. And I'm like, yeah, Mark, keep following me. Like, I swear I'm sober and I kind of know where I'm going. So Mark and his escort are kind of following us back. We later find out that Mark's kind of politely escorting this girl back to her car so that she can get home. And Steve sits there and he's decided that this is his moment where he's going to talk to Mark. Now Mark, again, kind of a tall dude, he's a little bit taller than I am, my buddy Steve, who's actually sitting over there in the orange shirt. Give Steve a round of applause real quick. Steve is not a very tall man. And Steve does not have well-coiffed hair, and Steve does not wear his sunglasses indoors. So there's a juxtaposition between these 2 people when they're walking right next to each other. And Steve sits there and looks up at Mark, and he's just kind of like, hi, my name's Steve, what's yours? Mark's like, hi, I'm Mark Silvestri. superstar artist. You might have heard of me before. And instead of shaking his hand, Steve starts petting him. I love your work. Oh my God. He's a very attractive man, and Steve could not contain himself in his inebriated state. So as I go and grab Steve, who now I'm escorting Rose, who can't keep walking, and Steve, who can't keep his paws off of Mark Silvestri, towards this pool that probably is a bad idea for us to be swimming in the first place when we can't stand up and we can't stop pawing people that we just met. Steve sits there and utters the words that will forever resound with me for my life and will forever be the reason that I will never work at Top Cow. Again whispering in a voice as quiet as I'm about to whisper to you, dude, that's not his wife. He's gonna bang her.
It was the most reasonable outcome.
The end of that story is that the pool was closed.
He's an attractive man.
I won't disagree. But Top Cow will never give either of us work ever again. We will never work. I've tried. I've done their submission program.
Wait, you were that asshole with the other guy.
They'll be like, yeah, it was your fault. You were sober. No, I wasn't. I was just sober enough.
Sober hit.
If by sober you mean that I had had a few, and that I could walk in a semi-straight line, then yes. So, in any case, so you meet a lot of celebrities and stuff at these conventions. One of the things, too, that I like to write about in some of my comics, like the Asshole books, very much kind of follow my life story and things that were kind of going on in my life and whatnot. There's no Mark Silvestri appearances in there, but there should be. But I ended up doing online dating when I ended up moving over to Chicago and had an absolutely horrendous experience. Hated it. Online dating for men, very different than it is for women. I do not argue this whatsoever, but my experience was very much like trying to get a job, where you send out like a boatload of resumes that's just like, hey, I noticed that you had this thing in common with me, that'd be cool, would you like to talk sometime? And you would just hear nothing back. And this would go on for months and months and months. And eventually I started doing some of the paid sites out there. Yes, I got desperate enough to pay somebody to try to match me with somebody else, because trying to find somebody to date outside of school, incredibly challenging. And so I ended up doing Match.com, which was just a series of people who were serial daters. They just wanted you to take them out and treat them to things, but they had absolutely no interest in settling down or committing. And I ended up doing OkCupid and Plenty of Fish, which are not paid sites, but those are just people that were looking to hook up. And then eventually did eHarmony, because I was like, I'm desperate enough to be here with the conservative religious crowd, but maybe it'll work for me, who knows? There might be a cool geeky chick out there. And I was on there for maybe 3 months, and it was like my last week on there, and I had had absolutely no luck on there. I'd had people make responses and stuff back, but nobody there that I really had any kind of kinship to or compatibility with, until I came across this profile. It was my last week, you know, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna have to start dating girls I meet at conventions. Not that there's anything wrong with you girls, you're awesome. But many of you are not from Chicago. And so I ended up coming across this profile who, you know, was pretty just kind of standard until I got down to the 5 things that they can't live without. And one of the 5 things they couldn't live without was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I was like, I gotta meet this girl. And so I shot her an email. I was like, hey, my profile is gonna close in like a week, but here's my email address. We should totally hang out sometime. And we ended up finally arranging our first date. And our first date, we almost got arrested. So we ended up meeting at my favorite Mexican restaurant in my old neighborhood, Lincoln Square, which is called Garcia's. And Garcia's is excellent. They have this amazing burrito ranchero that's seriously like this big. And it's just drowned in cheese. And then it's like caked in ranchero sauce. And you're just like, oh, I'm gonna have a heart attack, but I'm gonna die happy. And they also have these delicious pitchers of margaritas, which is what we ordered on our first date. And we got a little more intoxicated than we probably could have or should have, and decided at the end of dinner that walking would be a great idea, because it was kind of nice weather outside. And as we're walking around these neighborhoods, my future wife and I are holding hands and going through this park. And we go past these well-lit kind of white gazebos, and she sits there and says, you know, I've always told my friends that I would love to get proposed to at one of those gazebos over there. And being the Dom DeLuise, or being the Don Juan that I am, smooth and sultry with the ladies, I end up responding with, you know, I've always wanted to propose with a ring pop. Think about it. You have a multitude of colors that you can accessorize with, and anytime you need a snack, you've got one on your finger. She didn't find this entertaining at all. So we ended up hanging out at the park and going and playing on the swings, not realizing that the park had actually closed hours ago and that the cops were soon to descend upon us as we were making out on the slide. And so future dates ended up occurring after this, but that was how we almost got arrested on the first date. And eventually we ended up courting, and I ended up moving in. Because we kind of started to talk about future plans, and when I moved in, she kind of gave me this ultimatum where she was like, look, if you're going to move in, you've really got like a year to pop the question. And I'm like, okay, is the question, what kind of seasoning would you like on your popcorn? And that was not the question she wanted. So we started ring shopping and stuff like that, and looking at what her preferences were and all those good things. And it was a rather lengthy process. I moved in March, and I want to say probably around October or so, I had finally commissioned a ring to be constructed. And I absolutely love this ring. She's obviously wearing it on her finger now, which is white gold that kind of wraps around rose gold. And the white gold holds up the diamond in the center, and then written on the inside of the ring says, "Put me back on," which they screwed up the first time they did it. They said, "Put me on." And I was like, I don't want just anyone to wear this thing. Like, it belongs on a specific finger. And it is the finger that, if you can read this, it has currently been removed from. So they had to redo this. So the process of getting this thing built from scratch ended up taking something like 5 or 6 weeks, during which time we had attended a couple of weddings. And Beth continued to get a little bit more insistent about when this question was going to come. She's like, do you want to get married? You know you have to ask my father before, right? Well, you haven't even had a conversation with him yet. Little did she know that this thing was happening in the background of getting the ring made, and the only answer that I could give her to try to keep this as a surprise was, these things take time. To which she started to get very angry about this question. So my birthday ends up rolling around. It's not too far away from Halloween, so we threw like a Halloween/birthday party for me. And my buddies came in from town, and we were like, hey Beth, we're gonna go run some errands, and you know, we'll be back in time to set up for this party. Don't worry about it. And she's like, oh, where are you going? I'm like, oh, we'll probably go to Best Buy, and maybe we'll play some video games in an arcade and stuff like that. She's like, okay. And we go out to my buddy's car, and I'm like, guys, we're not going to Best Buy or to an arcade. We have to go up to this jeweler that I just got this ring made from because it's ready, and we're gonna go get it. And they're like, okay. So we go up there, and what takes absolutely freaking forever, we finally get this ring. We go back to the apartment, and I put it in my sock drawer because she's never gonna look in my sock drawer. Thankfully she didn't. And for the rest of the party, I'm just sitting there kind of oblivious, and she's sitting there walking around just being like, he hasn't even asked my father yet. Does he want to get married? Does he have commitment problems? Little did she know that I was actually going to pop this question on the day that she least expected it, which was my birthday, which was a couple days down the road. And so the day finally comes around where I decided I'm going to pop this question to her. And people at work are just like, are you nervous at all? Are you having a good, you know, like, are you okay with this? Like, you seem pretty calm. And I'm like, I'm totally fine with popping the question. I have no question in my mind that she's gonna say yes, because she's been harassing me for the last several months. But I haven't gotten in touch with her father yet. And it's the day I'm gonna pop this question. So the night before, I had gone into her cell phone, and I had stolen every single family number that she had in there, and I'm calling everybody. And it wasn't until I called her mom that I was like, hey, I kind of need to get in touch with your husband. It's kind of urgent. Could we maybe find a way to do that? And she's like, oh. Yes. He'll call you right back. Because apparently the dude doesn't answer his cell phone. Doesn't even turn it on. So he calls me while I'm in a meeting and just says, hey, call me at the home number and I'll talk to you then. And as soon as I get out of this meeting, I get the voicemail and I dial it back and the line is busy. And I dial the line back again in 20 minutes and it's still busy. And I dial the line back again in an hour and it's still busy. And at this point, we're about an hour away from the end of business. And I'm desperately thinking of a plan B for how I'm going to ask this question and be like, oh, and by the way, we can't tell your parents. Because I haven't asked permission yet, even though that was one of your qualifications for me being able to ask this question. And so I eventually called the mom back and I'm like, hey, look, I've been trying to call the house. He says he's at the house. The line is busy. Do you not have 2 lines? What's going on here? And she's like, hold on. Calls me back like 30 minutes later. Apparently after he called me, he left the line off the hook. Not on purpose, I'm told. But she apparently went home and yelled at him and she was like, look, if he doesn't ask this question tonight, if this thing doesn't happen because you weren't able to pick up the phone, I am divorcing you. And so finally we got on the phone and I sat there and I was like, hey, I think you know what this is about. I want to ask your daughter to marry me, but I need your permission. Is that cool? He's like, yep, welcome to the family. I'm like, great, bye. Hang up the phone. So we decide to make this something that Beth isn't going to expect, to recreate our first date. It's my birthday, I can do whatever I want. And so we get on the L, we go back to Garcia's, and the entire time we're kind of talking about the relationship and stuff. But as opposed to our first date, which was like in September, and it was still kind of warm out, my birthday is in November, and it's freaking cold outside. So at the end of the night, after we've had 1 glass of margarita, not a pitcher, she was not inebriated, I sit there and I go, hey, I think we should go take a walk. And she's like, are you nuts? It's cold outside. I'm like, this is my birthday, damn it. We're gonna do what I want to do. I'm the man. Please. And so we end up walking over, and I guess around the time that we ended up hitting over by the gazebos, she started to get wise. I was like, hey, you know, that's that park that we walked past that first time when we were dating. We almost got arrested. We never did go check out those gazebos, did we? We should go do that. We start walking over by the gazebos. I'm like, oh man, these are really pretty and kind of lit up, and hopefully no cops will come and arrest us, but we should totally like go walk up onto these gazebos. And she's totally getting wise to my game at this point because I'm definitely not Don Juan. And so we end up getting up onto the gazebo, and I sit there and I'm just kind of like, so do you remember on our first date when we walked past these things? And I was kind of like, and you were like, hey, I think it'd always be great to get proposed to at this gazebo. And she was like, yeah. I was like, and do you remember when I responded and I said that it would be a great idea to propose with a ring pop? And she was like, yes. And I was like, do you wanna? As I pulled out the ring pop. If you don't like this color, I got 3 more. I hand it to her and I start walking away. And she's like, and then I turn around before I reach the end of the gazebo and I was like, or we could do this with another ring. So I walk over to Beth, get down on the knee, and I'm like, Elizabeth Diane Noonkester, will you make the mistake of spending the rest of your life with me? And she was like, yeah. And she was able to tell her parents that night. So that was the story about how I met your mother. We got like 15 minutes left in this panel, and I want to leave time for you guys to sell, but some of my friends made a request that I tell one more story, which is a story that if you've ever been to this panel before, you've definitely heard it before. It is a public service announcement about why you should never do ecstasy. Has anyone here ever done ecstasy? Hands down.
Yeah, of course Brad has. What hasn't he tried?
So there's a time and a place for everything, and that time and place is college. And when I went to college, my roommates, or my suite mates, were drug dealers. Nothing heavy, mostly pot, occasionally ecstasy. And they got their hands on it the first time. They came into our room and they're like, hey guys, we got our hands on some ecstasy. Would you like to try some? And it's me and my roommate, Chris. And I'm like, no. I just rented the movie In the Mouth of Madness with Sam Neill. And you don't want to watch that movie when you're sober, much less when you're rolling. Plus I have a girl coming over. And Chris is like, you know, I'd like to try it. It'll be safe, like, you know, I'll just go in between the bathroom that's between our two suites. The RA won't get wise to it if you guys ever, you know, if I have a problem or anything, you guys will be there to kind of watch out for me. And I was like, that's cool, I'm gonna lock the door because there's a girl coming over. and I'm like, but if you need anything, just knock on the door. And Chris is like, all right. So before we even start the movie, I end up hearing something knock into the door. There's a knock out over there, and I walk over. I'm like, hey Chris, what's going on? He's like, nothing much. I just took the pill. They're shoving it up their butts. It's kind of weird and stuff. I don't really know what's going on. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Do you need anything, like water or anything? He's like, no, I just didn't want to be in there while they were doing this. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna start this movie now. He's like, all right, I'll talk to you later. And so about 20 minutes into the movie, I hear another ka-thunk and another. I go over, pause the movie, go over to the door. I'm like, hey Chris, what's going on? He's like, nothing much. Is the movie over yet? No, dude, it's only been 20 minutes. He's like, all right, well, can we just talk for a second? Sure, Chris, what's up? He's like, well, I'm feeling a little tingly. Like, it's kind of cool. Nothing's really kicked in yet. They're all playing with feathers and shit. It's really weird. They're like stroking it over their faces and stuff, and I'm not quite sure what's going on. It's kind of like that scene from Cleopatra, but they're all Cleopatra, and they're all also the slaves at the same time. I don't really get what's going on. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Do you need anything? Like, are you good? He's like, oh yeah, I just wanted to talk. I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna go back to my movie now. And about 20 minutes later, I hear another ka-thunk. So pause the movie, go over to the door. I'm like, hey Chris, what's going on? He's like, not much. Is the movie done? No, Chris, it's been 40 minutes. Okay, well, can we just talk? Sure, Chris, what's up? And he's like, everything feels great, man. It's finally kicked in. And the best part about it, he's like, everything feels like sex. And the best part about it is, I can touch the wall. I'm like, that's great, Chris. He's like, no, you don't understand. Because I anticipate touching it. And then I touch it. Like, that's awesome, dude. Do you need anything? He's like, no, I just wanted to talk. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back to my movie now. He's like, okay, bye. Another 20 minutes pass. I end up hearing like a thunk. Go over to the door again. It's Chris. All the lights are off, and he's got this glove on his hand with a light on each finger, and he's sweating beads. And I'm just kind of like, hey Chris, what's up? He's like, nothing. Is the movie over yet? I'm like, no, Chris, there's maybe another 20 minutes left in this movie. He's like, okay, well, can we just talk for a second? It's the climax of the movie, but yes, okay, Chris, what's up? And he's like, they locked me out of the room. They were doing weird shit in there, and I just didn't want to participate. And then I started seeing shit. And he starts following the lighted glove back into the bathroom, which all the lights are off. And I'm like, okay, Chris, well, if you need anything, you just let me know. Okay, bye-bye. And close the door. 20 minutes later, the movie ends. I don't hear another ka-thunk and a knock. And I start to get a little bit worried because he's been coming on pretty regularly. So I end up opening up the bathroom door after the lady has left. And I have to stumble to the light switch, which is in the middle, and I end up tripping over something. I assume it's Chris. And I go over and I hit the light switch, and Chris is buck-ass naked. Kind of straddling, like if this is the wall and this is the floor, he's kind of straddling the wall. And he's still got the light on, and he's just kind of like doing this with his lips. And I'm like, okay, at least he's not dead. And so I go and I stick him in the shower, because dehydration and overheating is one of the reasons why you can die from ecstasy. I've turned the water on. I'm just like, I hope you don't get hypothermia or drown. And I leave and go to bed. The moral of the story is, don't do ecstasy. The more you know. So you guys have been a pretty awesome audience, and I want to thank you guys so much for coming. With the last 10 minutes that are here, I would like to let you know that I do have some books up here available for sale. I'm not going to be at the convention tomorrow. I have family obligations. But if you guys were interested in making any purchases, I would love to sell to you guys tonight. We've got the complete Asshole set up here, either the limited edition box set or the individual books. The red book is $5 each. Volume 1 and Volume 2 are $15. Volume 3 is $25. Albert the Alien is about the first intergalactic foreign exchange student from another planet. They're $5 each. Aya Comics and Junkyard Chase are both $3, and I also have free bookmarks up here. And then I'm also probably going to be escaping to the Cards Against Humanity panel if you guys want to hang out after that. So thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome.